an in-person forum actually, and that was supported by the British Society of Gerontology and was on the topic of falls prevention in older adults. And previous webinar recordings can be found on our YouTube channel, and Jen can pop the link to that in the chat so that you can revisit any of those sessions or this session when that's up there as well. Our first speaker today is Nancy, Dr. Nancy Zook. Nancy is an Associate Professor of Psychology at UE in Bristol. And Nancy's presentation is entitled Social Robotics, AI and Aging Through a Psychological Lens. And Nancy's background is in cognitive aging, neurocognitive assessment and human-robot interactions. And her research is in healthcare technology, considers psychological underpinnings in relation to advances in artificial intelligence. And her current work combines eye movement detection, neurocognitive and machine learning approaches for the development of efficient technology that is sensitive to early signs of atypical aging. And her work in social robotics uses experimental and physiological approaches to studying human interactions, technology acceptance and design, with the goal of advancing user-centered, ethically informed robotic technologies. So, Nancy, hopefully the technology will be kind to us and you'll be able to use your PowerPoint up if you do have one. Great.
So hopefully everybody can see. You can see the PowerPoint. Yep. Okay, great.
Yeah,
okay.
Great.
All right, great.
Thanks,
So hi everyone. So I'm going to kind of talk through.
Nancy, I think you've muted yourself.
Sorry, I knew there was going to be some kind of technology problem there.
Of course, the day for it.
Okay, so I'm going to be talking through kind of three different areas, and so to me they're all very intrinsically linked to each other from my background in psychology, but sometimes it's hard for me to explain when people ask me what I do. It takes me a while to kind of figure out how to address that question. In terms of my background, it's in cognitive neuropsychology, so experimental neuropsychology, cognitive psychology with a focus on aging. I think the work that I've done in this area really stresses the need for interdisciplinarity. And I think the role of a psychologist brings key and instrumental aspects into the development of health technology. And so in psychology, I think we have particular strengths in relation to experimental method, the methodological designs, neurocognitive assessment, and also obviously our perspectives on understanding human behavior. So in relation to human-robot interactions, I think there's quite a lot that we can offer within that field, and that's where you see psychologists working alongside people from other areas. And similarly with applications of artificial intelligence and machine learning. So even though, I don't know all the engineering and the mathematics, I think in relation to psychology, we bring quite a lot to the field and to the development. Okay, is in social robotics, and so this is really how I got started. It just came from some conversations with people in the Bristol Robotics Lab, asking for my views around, how do we look at arousal? How do we look at anxiety and emotion? As psychologists, what kind of technology do we use? What types of measures do we use? And I became involved in a project called Socrates, and that was a Horizon 2020 funded program, and worked with a PhD student at UE Bristol through the robotics lab. And so what was really great about this project is that it took place across multiple universities across Europe and had a very multidisciplinary approach. Our focus looked specifically at ethics and using social robotics with older adults. And so when you're looking at social robotics and aging, there are a lot of different places where robotics have the potential to help support an aging population. So this can be in relation to social support, so just having someone to have a conversation with. It can be in relation to health monitoring. So, looking at different health factors, blood pressure, heart rate, etc., in relation to safety, so alerting for falls, and being used more generally to support independence. So whilst there's a lot of positive aspects of social robotics, there's a lot we still don't know in terms of, what are some of the driving factors between acceptance and use of social robotics. So there is a lot of evidence out there that says that that certainly supports the use of artificial expression of emotion, and that's what I'm going to talk about now. So if we look on the right side of the slide, this is the Pepper robot, which has since been discontinued. Some of you may have seen Pepper before. Pepper is a humanoid robot and has a childlike appearance. So it's a kind of smaller robot. So and Pepper can express emotion in different ways or can embody emotion. So the upper right-hand corner, that's a picture of the Pepper within the care home. And then what you can see are examples. So in A, where Pepper has the arms outstretched, some bright colors and uses a high-pitched voice, we use that to show a positive emotion. In the middle picture, we have a more neutral stance, coloring, and also we altered the pitch of the voice. And then in the final one, the shoulders punched in, head down to show a negative perception. So some of the things that we can look at within this robotics literature is, first of all, are people able to recognize emotion in a machine? And the answer overall is yes. And the same is true also for the robot in the bottom corner, the zoomorphic dog-like robot, which we can model emotion, again, based on vocalizations, the lights, and some of the behavioral actions. So people are able to say, yes, this robot's showing positive, neutral, or negative. And so by changing these, so this artificial expression of emotion is recognized, and it can also help to facilitate interactions. It can make them feel more natural. It can increase the acceptance and use of robots. So overall, if this leads to an increase in acceptance and use, that's obviously quite a positive thing. And it can also lead to an increase in attachment. Okay, so people do show attachment to robots. Okay, so most of us can identify with that. We probably have some level of attachment to some type of technology, our phones, some people to Alexa. I've heard people talking about Roombas for the vacuums. So we know that that attachment can also, can be a positive thing. It can increase the natural interactions within the way that people interact with a social robot. And if it is being used to support, then that's going to be a good thing. What's looked at a little bit less are what are some of the possible ethical implications of this in relation to people with different characteristics. So whilst overall, this attachment is seen as a positive, it can also be deceptive. And so when we're talking about deception within social robotics, it's not the deliberate intent to deceive, but obviously a robot can't really express emotion. We're programming it. It is an artificial expression. And so a lot of the work that we did in this area was based on this. So if, is this deceptive? And what is the impact? Are there situations where potentially some people are more vulnerable, where it can increase dependence and create expectations that the robot can't possibly fill? And is that in some ways, could that exploit potentially people's vulnerabilities? Okay. So through a series of studies that we did using Pepper the robot, we had just 8 sessions. They were quite brief, so about 5 to 8 minutes. So using some of the techniques, we did embody emotion. So people either interacted with a neutral robot or that positive or negative Pepper. And Pepper was just talking about wonders of the world. So it was a fairly neutral topic. So in relation to our emotion manipulation, it was quite small. And what we found is that people we had a lot of people who had lower medium levels of attachment and only a couple who had higher levels of attachment after these sessions. We found that attachment remained pretty steady throughout. I think one of the quite interesting things in there, though, is that we did have a couple of people who, if we look at their own attachment style, so that's, how you connect with others. They did have insecure attachments or lower forms of attachment, and they were ones that expressed discomfort when around not being able to see Pepper anymore. So whilst, it certainly wasn't the majority of the participants, it was just a couple of people, it's enough to kind of flag that, when you are using artificial expression of emotion, we do need to have a framework so that we're able to consider what is the risk that's involved. When does it, what is manipulation? How much are people consenting to this type of manipulation, and how much do they understand about this aspect? I think one of the things that I'm really interested in exploring even more is how does this aspect, so embodying or expressing emotion within a social robot, um, how does that influence the perceptions in relation to human-like, so if people are thinking it's more human-like, as I've noted, they may have expectations that aren't going to be met. What does that mean longer term, and when is it okay, right? So sometimes, when is it fine to have that expression of emotion? So it's looking at ethics in a way that people don't always kind of think about as much within a social robotics framework. So with that in mind, I'm going to talk about another project. So I think a lot of the work that we did, we found that most people didn't mind that, having, they were aware that the robot doesn't really have emotion, that it did facilitate the interactions. It made them more positive. They liked interacting with a robot that showed emotion more than a neutral. So all of those aspects. So if we're looking at, how do we then, kind of have these ethical questions in our mind? How do we then use that when we're looking at developing other types of robotic technology? So another project that I'm involved with is socially assistive walker. So we start off with a physical aid that a lot of older adults already are using, and think about, are there ways that we can augment or enhance that with technology? And how do we, think about that within the technology that we have? So again, looking at, what are the actual needs that people are expressing in the community? What are aspects that they may want? So this is an MRC funded project with a group of colleagues and multiple stakeholders. And so we start off with looking at gait assistance. Also, what about should this socially assistive walker have a social aspect to it? So if we take what we know from other social robotic models, are there aspects that we can build in? Can that interact with homes, telemonitoring and telehealth? So doctor appointments through the walker, are there metrics that could be detected? So again, blood pressure, um, heart rate, skin conductance, and also just as a navigational guide. And that's what the figure is representing here. So if this gentleman, maybe he's just moved to a new residential community and says, take me to the kitchen, and the walker can actually guide him to that place. So that navigational aspect of it. So with this project, one of the places, so obviously we had the walker as a starting point, but what we wanted to know is, and working with in co-design sessions and focus groups, what kind of, in terms of supporting activities of daily life and physical health, what do users think would be useful? What do users think would be helpful? And we had an initial prototype. So the walker on the far left was one of our initial prototypes. So in these focus groups, we started off just with a discussion, so including showing that the image of the man, so here we have this walker, we have some of these tasks that might be useful, but we wanted to, consider with our focus groups, and we had focus groups within residential older adult living communities. We also had them out in the wider community as well. So just kind of us talk about, as you get older, what are some things that you might want to have some support with? Then we showed the prototype. and some of the capabilities, and I'll walk through a demonstration in just a minute. But that prototype can be used, can greet you, can be used to kind of guide somebody through a sit to stand, medication reminders and guidance. And then we had people give us feedback on the prototype. What functions do you think we should have? What functions do you think aren't necessarily needed? So to use the example of that navigation, and to give you a better idea of what the smart walker is capable of. So if you look at the prototypes on the handlebars, those handlebars can vibrate. So if we're looking at navigation detection and someone's trying to know if they're supposed to turn right or left, the handlebars can vibrate based on the direction that it's going on. And those handlebars can also have sensors that potentially could also get health information as well. There's a stand for a tablet here, so people could also get navigational instructions using that tablet, so similar to what we would use on our phones or in our cars. There are also lights on your original prototype, so people can have a green light so they can, get that visual feedback, or you could also have purely auditory feedback. So the same task being done within the situation, but different navigational feedback given throughout. So we went through some of the different features with the group, as I said, and then we asked them to write down on sticky notes, what are some other features that you can think of? What are some other things, what things are standing out that would be particularly useful? What things potentially won't be useful? And this is just a standard walker, right? So these are things that are meant to be modular. So they're going to be built for different individuals. So one person might like the handlebars vibrating. Personally, I find I would probably jump too much, and I would prefer the light guidance instead. And you can see, so through feedback through these co-design sessions and these focus groups, what we've done is adapted it into the prototype that you see on the far right. One of the big things you can see is we realized really quickly that some people didn't like having the screen where it was or not being able to move it. So that's a lot more adjustable. We've made changes to the physical aspects of the walker as well as some of the technology. And we're also looking at, in relation to the tablet, what should be on the tablet, what type of social communication aspects might be beneficial. And we're still working on the final prototype and hoping to start some user studies soon to get some more information on what's effective with this piece of technology. So I've mentioned co-design, so that's I'm involved on a couple of projects where we're using co-design, and I just wanted to kind of point out how important this is. So obviously, you want to avoid design for a problem that doesn't exist. So having multiple voices represented throughout is obviously very, very important. So we have tried to include in focus groups for this project and other projects, not only users, people who are currently using walkers, for example, but also potential users, carers, family members, and researchers. So for some projects, like I said, you start with that. The starting point was the walker, for example, for that project, but also looking at, first of all, taking a step back. So as people get older, what types of support would they need, and thinking a little bit more about how would you design a robot to support that. So, we've had some groups where where we just started off with, as you get older, what are things that you might find that are changing? And it is going back to what are the primary areas of support that you might need. So if we're looking at social support, one of the things that came through is they want something that's not threatening. Okay, so from a design perspective, that makes sense. From a psychological perspective, that makes sense. And so we want to make sure that, that we're listening to what people are saying, and that we're also understanding that a lot of this technology will need to be adapted to individual users. So we've talked about voice pitch and also accents. I can see sometimes comments popping up, so I'll try to address that. So that is one of the things that we've talked about as well. And what's interesting, so a lot of the voices that are coming through, people prefer to have their own accents on the robotic technology that they're interacting with. That's another thing that has come through with some of the focus groups that we've held. I've got quite a lot more that I could say about that, but I am going to move on because I know that we have some time issues here. Yeah, so again, so these co-design sessions, they are continuing to take place, and we're looking at, how do we look at the development of social robotics in a way that's modular that can help support people. The final project that I'll talk about relating to health technology is looking at aging, cognitive function, and eye movement. So this is slightly different from the social robotics. This is working with colleagues in computer and machine vision. And specifically Wenhao Zhang. And so we're looking at can you there are changes in eye movement and there are changes in cognitive function as we get older. And these changes look different between typical and atypical aging. So being able to differentiate these things at the earliest possible moments is obviously really important, especially now that we have some newer drugs that are being developed to potentially that are showing a lot of promise in the possibility of treating things like Alzheimer's. So being able to identify very early mild cognitive impairment is important. So but right now, commercial eye trackers and things that are used in relation to eye movement are really expensive. And they also will typically focus on a few variables. You can't look at lots of variables within the same model. So what we're looking at trying to develop is a system that allows for a single camera, so an off-the-shelf camera, and something that's a little bit more engaging. So not just watching a dot, so watching people's smooth pursuit or watching them jump, and using a machine learning approach so that we're able to consider multiple variables within the data set. So with this project, we've taken and I'll talk you through the game in just a minute, but you can go ahead and kind of watch the little design. So what we're looking at is, through this game, and this game is based on a cognitive task that we've used in prior research. So this cognitive task basically lets us make the task either harder or easier, and with the assumption that as the task gets harder, that's going to make some of these differences in eye movements that are potentially reflecting aging and potential underlying neuropathology more prominent, right? So as the task gets harder, we're expecting it to kind of pull apart some of these aging differences between typical and atypical. And so with the standard task, what you have is shapes, they're changing colors, and you have to try to sort them. So this is a gamified version. With the standard task, we were able to use machine learning and just using eye movements, place people in age categories. So that so with the game but that task is not as engaging, it's not as fun. So we're working on trying to develop something that could be used more long term, that's potentially more engaging. This is the second version, so we also used a co-design aspect of this as well. We took our original design to a group of older adults, researchers.
Do some emails.
Oops.
You can do it.
And we
Cup of
asked.
coffee first.
Oops, sorry, I think
Me.
somebody's.
Oh, can we make sure everyone's got their mics off? Thanks.
Yep. So we did get feedback from, after using our initial design, we did get feedback from a PPIE group, which was incredibly useful on instructions and game design. What we're currently looking at is can we use eye movements to detect, to kind of correspond now to cognitive measures. So we're giving battery of neuropsychological assessments and seeing how that corresponds. If we look at the task, oh, now it's started there, but I'll click on it so it can start moving. So you can see that there are types of fruit moving across the screen. So we've called it a fruit sorting task. And if an apple is red, you click on the right side. And if the apple is yellow, you do nothing. If there's a pear, if it's yellow, you click on the left basket. And if it turns other colors, if it turns green, you do nothing. So what we're able to do within this task is vary the difficulty. So we start off with just apples, and then the addition of the pear makes it more difficult. And we can also change the speed and the trajectory. So this allows us to get quite a good cognitive assessment. So we look at how fast people are able to sort, how accurate they are in their sorting. And then we can also combine that with their eye movements. So hopefully I've explained that okay. Oh, so and the key part is that sometimes the apple or the pear that you're sorting to is on the same side and sometimes it's on the different side. And so what you find is it's easier to sort the fruit if it's changing color on the same side as the basket. So that's kind of the key thing from a cognitive perspective is that's harder because we usually want to hit the same side each time. So if we know we have to sort it, we have to stop that very automatic response, override it, and make another option. So we have just completed the task, or we've just completed the testing, and we're currently working on our analysis of the data. So like I said, it was quite a big undertaking. We have so we tested healthy, self-reported community dwelling, healthy older adults. And we also selected younger adults as well. So we have from 18 to, I think, 80s in our sample. And so we have a full neuropsych assessment. We have their performance on this gamified Simon task and their eye movements. And we do still have quite a ways to go, but we have already found that machine learning can detect the different conditions. So when I'm saying the different conditions, whether the fruit's changing color on the same side or the opposite side, so whether it's congruent or incongruent, using just 2 to 3 seconds of eye movements. Still have ways to go on this one in looking at things, but we are seeing some of the age-related changes that we would expect to see. So on, for example, the Simon task, you do see that as you get older, you get a little bit slower, your reaction time decreases. On other tasks, we're getting what we expected in that age stays really steady. So our vocabulary measure. So I think I've covered quite a lot of information. So let me just end by noting that I have loads of collaborators. So I think one of the things that I am part of these projects, for all of these projects, I work with large teams, as you can see represented. So just across these projects that I've talked about here, these are some of the people that I have worked with. And I did have questions. Oh, okay. So yeah, happy to take any questions.
Brilliant. Thank you, Nancy. Thank you very much for that. It's a really interesting presentation. You've got lots going on. So thank you. We were going to take questions at the end, but I see someone's got their hand up. If you would you like to keep hold of your question, and then we can put the questions together at the end, if that's okay. Brilliant. Thank you. Right, okay. So our next presenter is Professor Jonathan Rossiter, and Jonathan's going to tell us about the Vivo. Is it Vivo or Vivo, Jonathan?
Vivo.
Vivo, yep, herb for enhanced independent living. And this is a research project that brings together wearable soft robotics and digital health to keep people active and healthy and independent. So Jonathan is a professor of robotics at the University of Bristol and is head of soft robotics at the Bristol Robotics Lab. So Jonathan's going to talk more about this now. So I'll hand over to Jonathan. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jennifer, and everybody for inviting me along. It's really an honor to talk about some of the recent research we've been doing in healthy aging and for helping people with disabilities. It's also nice so I've done this talk a few times to Age UK, as some of you on the call might have seen, and it's good maybe now to talk a little bit more on the kind of research end of things. But what I'll do is I'll show you some videos. I hope they play. If they don't, tell me, because I hope the audio comes through. And just to present some of the things we've been doing and the kind of the trajectory we've had over the last 10 years or so. So let me just get into that. You can see a couple of examples of the things on the screen there. On the left is a pair of trousers. We talk about those a little bit later. On the right, there is the calming cushion, which helps people to maintain calmness by moving as you hold it. So let me just give you a tiny bit of background about me. I work in the University of Bristol and Bristol Robotics Laboratory, and as you know, as Nancy said, it's a collaboration between the University of Bristol and the University of the West of England. I'm sure everybody knows that. But I lead the soft lab, and the soft lab looks at soft robotics. And the first thing I have to do really is to show people what we don't do, so that then I can focus on what we do. I just minimize people's faces, just move something out of the way, go out of the way. That's better. Good. Okay, so first of all, I better say what we don't do. And I just love putting this slide up here because it shows really, really cool robots. I mean, they're brilliant. I love them, from Boston Dynamics. And they're wonderful. You know, you've got a robot on the top left there that's doing parkour, but the technology is very cool behind. And then at the bottom right, you've got Spot the Dog, which I'm sure you've seen around, which is also very cool. But these are all rigid robots. I think Nancy also spoke a little bit about acceptance of robotics and trust in robotics. And that's something that we also believe a lot in. And I think on this screen, you can kind of see that I'm not sure I'd want to trust these robots. I mean, the one on the bottom right, I would say, is the spookiest of them all. What have they done? They've taken a robot and they've made it look like a dog, and then they put a snake on top of it, and then they've made it open doors. So if that's not a little bit frightening, I don't know what is. And on the bottom left, you can see one frightening figure on the bottom left. That's the new Optimus robot. And on the top right, interestingly, Nancy was speaking about Pepper robot, and we've got a lot of Pepper around here. But one of the interesting things is when it switches off and you see it sitting in the corner, it doesn't look very friendly. It just looks really miserable. So social acceptance of these kind of robots, I think, is really interesting. But as I say, we don't do this kind of robot. In the soft lab, we do different kinds of robots to help people. But I do think these are very important. The technologies behind these robots are going to have a big impact on our lives. But of course, I always start with a little bit of context, and I think most of us on the call know this. Of course, we have very much an aging population, but one fact or statistics or prediction that I like to speak about is to care for people as we age and as the demographic shifts, we need more than 500,000 care workers by 2030. Now, that figure comes from about 1.5 years, 2 years ago. We're getting closer to 2030. We're perilously close, 5 years. We can't get 500,000 care workers. Don't know quite what's going to happen because the technologies I'm going to talk about today are probably not going to hit this need within the time. So I don't know quite what the solution is in the short term. But let's just go a little bit longer term and think about how we might solve this problem or help to solve this problem of people living independently and healthily for as long as they'd like to avoid falls, as we see on the screen, and to help people to move around. And my job, I feel, is to enable that. So I thought I would look at what really is the kind of the deluxe version of care at the moment. And I think it's this. I might be wrong, but I think it's this. This is a video from Australia showing somebody who needs to get out of their wheelchair and two people are helping them. And that's wonderful if you can afford to have two people help you move out of a chair and then go into bed. That's wonderful. But the UK can't afford that. It's infeasible, I think. The NHS certainly can't. So what could be a solution? And our vision is to help people and to perhaps to consider us as augmented people. And I like to think of us as we get older becoming cyber seniors. You're older, but you're still capable of doing things. And it's natural, of course, for muscles to degrade as we get older and for us to become more frail. But perhaps we can provide engineered solutions, robotic solutions, augmented solutions, where we're using the technology for physical and intelligent support to enable us to do the things that we want to do. And here's just an example of somebody, lifting up a weight that they couldn't have done without the help of these technologies. So we focus on what this lady is wearing on her arms there, and that's, I'll talk about it a bit later, more of a soft robotic kind of technology. But it's interesting to see that soft robots, I think, in future will be everywhere around us. So those are, soft robots are not based on motors and bits of metal and gears. They're not those kind of systems. They're more soft and compliant, a little bit like natural materials and natural animals. But in future, I think we can see that the robots will be around us. The soft robots can be part of our furniture, for example, or our chairs or our beds, with motorized, actuated beds, actuated chairs. I mean, of course, there's a lot of that around already, but you can see how technologies can be around us. And then I think they're going to be closer and closer till they're on us, in terms of clothing, for example, and assist devices on us. And ultimately, they will be inside us, and we do work in this area in terms of implantable medical devices and implantable artificial muscles to help restore mobility with implantation, which is, that's obviously got a long way to go before we can actually do that in clinic. And then finally, the robots, soft robots, these kind of materials will be parts of us. So we won't even know that we are augmented by this, not in an everyday sense anyway, because the implanted augmentation devices will just be natural and part of us. So we're going that way. We can't do the implantation and making robots part of us just yet. So instead, we focus on one area where we think we can deliver assistance to help people to maintain independence, and that's with clothing. And clothing is really good because we wear it all the time. It's there. If you can make clothing the care worker, then you have it on your body all the time. You're carrying it around all the time. As soon as you get up in the morning, you put your clothing on. And if that has the ability to give you assistance, then that becomes your mobile care device. But it's also sobering to realize that clothing hasn't changed for 5,000 years. I think there's a peat bog man on the left-hand side there, basically natural fibers and clothing. And on the right, you can see Steve Jobs, who didn't change his uniform for some 20 odd years. But importantly, clothing is on us. So we've been working in this area for about 8 or 9 years to try to make robotic clothing, which can help move people and give people assistance and give people stability when they're standing. And that's especially important for aging, but it's also useful for people who've had strokes or have had degenerative diseases and so on. So I want to just go through a couple of the projects that we've run in the past. This is what we call the Right Trousers project. This was EPSSC funded a few years ago, finished. And the goal here was to develop the first generation of assistive robotic trousers, clothing in this case, but trousers specifically, to help people to move around and to stand safely. And you can see on the left-hand side the design that we finished with, which has got all those interesting components of power and being able to stiffen around the knees so that you could stand stably, and artificial muscles at the top and the bottom above the knees, those little orange stripes. Those help you to get out of the chair or help you to walk effectively. And there's a waistband that expands and contracts so that's very easy to put on. But we were very ambitious there, and we thought, well, we're going to make those within some 5 years. And it took us a little bit longer to do the technology. Always good to start out ambitious. And I'll play you the video on the right, which is showing where we ended up. But you can also see on the right that there's the Wallace and Gromit wrong trousers. I have to get this right. The wrong trousers, which is inspiration for this, I think loosely, or I think for us it's more a case of the media like to use the term the wrong trousers, and we have to keep telling them that we're not making the wrong trousers. I think that's a wrong connotation. We're making the right trousers. There's also, coming back to what we were looking at before, Nancy was saying, in terms of acceptability and trust, I think the wrong trousers on the right there are an example where you don't trust technology because the trousers took control. And we're very keen that people have got great trust in our technologies. So it's not such a good illustration of where the trousers could go. But I'll just play the video. I hope you can hear it. If you can't, please say.
artificial muscles aim to replicate the movement of your own bodily muscles. When there is a nerve impulse into the muscles contract. And we replicate that with smart materials and smart structures, which we then put inside the clothing.
Great. That was a nice video that the BBC Radio produced for their Media Online. It's a really nice short snippet. So from the Right Trousers project there, we learnt a lot, not only about the design on the left, which we call a looks like prototype. It looks like how we want them to be, but we can't make it just yet. And I think in that video you saw some of the technologies, flashing past, which are underlying the trousers. And they include things like artificial muscles, structures whereby you apply some stimuli and then they contract. And of course, that's replicating human muscles. And therefore, when we put them on the clothing, they can work with our own muscles. So I'll give you a couple of examples of those. The first is that video that we saw, the snippet that we just saw very quickly. And one of the very simplest early demonstrations that we showed was to help people who are able to move around, but when they go to the toilet, if they haven't got good functioning in the hands, they struggle with buttons or zips or whatever it is that's in their clothing, and it's difficult to prepare to go to the toilet. So if you've got arthritis and you can't undo your zips, your belt, or whatever, wouldn't it be nice to be able to clap your hands or say trousers finish, and then the trousers will naturally just automatically fall down. And it's a very simple example, but it's quite a powerful example. But also, it shows that we're only going halfway, because taking trousers off is one thing, but putting trousers on is the next. I think that's where the focus of the work I'll show you a bit later is on, helping people to put their trousers on, to help their clothing put itself on rather than take off. But you can see how very simple actuation can solve one problem quite well. Next one, here we go. And from those, in the video, you could see some of these little plastic balls. There's one in the middle, there's some in the middle. I don't know whether you can see my mouse, but there's some balls here, and they are basically plastic tubes, and they act as artificial muscles if we blow air into them. So we use a compressor to blow air into those, and then they contract. And I'll show you this example here. But what's interesting here is not just the actuators in the middle here, which will move and move this arm, but also these little structures on the right, which are basically as thin as a credit card and about the same size as a credit card. And what they do is they generate the compressed air, the air that drives those little air bubble muscles in the middle. And that's quite revolutionary, because normally what we need to generate air for muscles is a pump. You hear them going pop, 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 or a compressor. And those are heavy and big and noisy. So instead here we have a new technology which is coming through, which enables us just to apply electricity to this credit card pump, and then it will generate enough air, compressed air, to drive the muscles. Let's see if I can show you this video. I might have to move it forward to make it a bit faster, but maybe not. There we go. Let me go back here. There. So what's happening here is that the little credit card sized things on the right, they're kind of copper colored. They are squeezing and pushing air through the tube into that plastic bag structure in the middle, which will then cause those to contract, as you can see, and lift up the rubber duck, for example, but also lift the arm. So we're working as a demonstrator of this for people who've got motor neuron disease and they can't lift their hands up to feed themselves, or to move a mobile phone to near their eye so that they can use the mobile phone. And this is an example of assistive technology. Now here, we're just showing it with the arm and the pumps, as it were. But our next step is to turn this, put this inside clothing. Let me just move on. Here we go. So we have been looking at taking these technologies and turn them into robotic clothing. And this is an example of the latest work, which is under review at the moment. And this is a resistive suit rather than an assistive suit. And this was designed for not only assistance as people get older, but also as a spacesuit to go up into space to help people who are in low gravity. So there's a really interesting case that people get older, they lose muscle function and weakness and bone strength. And that is the same thing that happens when you put people up in space, but it just happens much faster in space. The muscles become weaker and the bones become osteoporotic much more quickly than they do down on the Earth. So that's a really nice test bed for us to apply some of these robotic clothing technologies. So what this device does, I'll show you in the video in the next slide. This provides controlled resistance to the muscles so that you encourage your muscles to act more strongly, and that keeps the astronauts, people in space, healthy for longer because it's exercising their legs more like being on Earth. And we've shown that in this particular case, the resistance applied by the suit enables muscle function to be basically the same as Earth. Well, that wouldn't be the case if you didn't have the suit. What would happen is your muscle functions would be less because it's much easier to move around in space, and that is the problem. But what we've done is to flip this around so that it is no longer a resistive suit, but it's an assistive suit. What that means is we change the actuation profile of our artificial muscles. They're colored in kind of blue and yellow on the left-hand side here. You can see them down here. And they're in the suits here at the front. And we've changed the actuation profile so that as you move your leg forward in the swing, as you're walking, then they give you a bit of a boost. And when you're pulling back, they give you a bit of a boost. And when you're towing off, like pushing at the end of your stride, it gives you a bit of a boost. And today we just demonstrated those to the BBC who came along, and then the BBC reporter put them on, and luckily they could feel some boost as they were walking. And our next goal here is to take these technologies and to try them with people who are older and have challenges with mobility to see if they can also feel the actuation, and then they also feel it's a benefit. So it's easier to show what's happening. And this one is a video from the hypergravity case. So what's happening here is it's applying resistance. And all we want to do, of course, is just to turn it round so that instead of being resisting at a particular time, you assist at that. I hope the video is running. Yes, there we go. And you can see kind of a typical test setup of our robotic trousers. And they don't really look much like trousers at the moment, do they? But I hope you can use your imagination to see that all of the black bubbles there that are moving around and they're actuating and then they're pulling the legs forwards and backwards are, over the next few years, going to be embedded into the textiles, into the clothing. These are all made out of textiles, but you can see that they're strapped on the body rather than being part of clothing. But this enables us to evaluate these technologies here so that we can then put them in the clothing. But you can see them running there, and they're quite effective and they're doing the right thing. The next step is to turn those into clothing. And that is where the Vivo Hub for Enhanced Independent Living comes in. So this is a collaborative project between 5 universities. It's really focused in Bristol at UWE and University of Bristol and Bristol Robotics Laboratory. And our focus is to translate some of those tech that we've just shown into those the actual clothing that's going to be used by people as they get older. And that hits those targets of helping people with physical assistance and to be able to move around, especially focusing on activities of daily living. And those are fundamental activities like being able to move around the house, to be able to move limbs and arms and so on, being able to stand stably, but also to have those more enhanced activities of living. For example, going out of the house, going to see one's friends, going to the shops, to the bank, going to a cafe and so on, and not feeling that you are restricted to home. Because we all know that if we can maintain mobility, we have physical health benefits, but we also have mental health benefits too. So that's the mobility end. But as I discussed earlier, one of the challenges is to make sure that people can wear these smart devices easily. And that is absolutely the problem of helping people to put them on. And ideally, for those who can't do it themselves, for the clothing to put itself on, self-wearing clothing. That, I think, will be a game changer for a lot of people. My father, he's getting older and he's struggling to put on his socks and his trousers. Wouldn't it be nice if he could just wake up, clap his hands, and his trousers would put themselves on? That'd be great. It seems quite a challenge away, but we have 6 years, and it's a big project with sufficient funding, we think, from the Research Council, the UK EPSRC Research Council, to enable us to do that. And we started in December last year, and we're ramping up. So we hope to have some demonstrations of our first devices within about a year, and then we'll move on from them. But just, I think, given the time, I'm not sure what the times are, I will just show you one video. And this is the Vivo Hub video, giving you an idea of the context and what the goal is of our technologies.
Hello, my name is Rani. Getting up and about isn't as easy as it used to be. Aging, it turns out, is not for the faint-hearted. It can slow you down, take away your confidence, and make you second-guess every step. I have to be so careful doing the things I used to take for granted. Everyday tasks can seem like an ordeal. And the thought of going out alone makes me feel anxious. I miss my independence and the carefree days of being able to play with my grandchildren. Now just trying to get up from my chair is enough to make me feel dizzy. It's because of my blood pressure. But that's all about to change. Thanks to the help of my new robotic suit designed to sit discreetly under my clothes. It has sensors, artificial muscles, and support assistants to steady me. It empowers me to do what I want, when I want. Smart engineering means it fits my body shape without any fiddly fastenings. My home is also equipped with sensors that signal to the suit when it needs to respond. It gently squeezes my body so the blood doesn't rush from my head, and automatically braces my legs when I stand. Now I don't have to worry about being ready for action. When I go out with friends or my granddaughter, it's so nice to not feel like I'm slowing them down. And I can walk a lot further without pain. My great-granddaughter loves my new robotic suit. She calls it my superpower. And being able to play with her gives her parents a bit of a break. Having the confidence to go out and have my independence back because of this suit means everything to me. And it's not just me set to benefit from this new technology. It has the potential to support so many people to remain independent, stay active, and enjoy older age to the fullest, whatever their hobbies might be.
Never felt this good before.
It's always good to end on a nice bit of music. Oh, here we go. So that's the Vivo Hub, which is just kicking off. We have some prototypes which are being developed now. And the most important part about the Hub really isn't the technology, to be honest. It's the people. And what we have done from the start is to make sure that the technologies and the focus on applications are very much led by the users. So to do that, we've put together a co-design team and a full PPIE program. And Lauren is leading that. And unfortunately, as we know, she's not with us today. But I think next time Lauren will be able to catch up on the PPIE program for Vivo. It's great because us as engineers, we're pretty confident that we can make things. But then when we talk to end users and then they say, well, we don't want that, thank you very much. It's always incredibly sobering and educating to find out how far we are sometimes from the targets, not just in the technology, but also in expectations. And I think the final thing here on making sure that this is patient-led and clinician-led and user-led is that enables that full trustworthiness. And one thing we've learned over the last few years, and it's a really good focus by the government and the research councils on trustworthiness, is there's no good giving people technologies if they don't trust it. And that word trust is so important. You wouldn't, if you don't trust a robot, would you ever use it? And I think that's the mantra that we would have. If you don't trust your clothing, your assist device, you wouldn't use it. And so that's really our focus for the next stage, is to make sure we could do co-design, co-development, very much trustworthy and ethical, of course, to hit some of these targets of independent living. I think that's it. I think I will stop there. I can't see anybody. I need to then see if I can see people. Does that fit? I wasn't sure about the timing.
That's great. Thank you, Jonathan. That's really good. We've got about 10 minutes, I suppose, now to just have a look through some of the questions. So thank you again, Nancy and Jonathan, for those presentations. And it might be while you were talking about Laura not being able to be here, it might be that we could do a session around public involvement in different projects. So sort of tag it into a public involvement session, because I know that there's lots of projects out there that utilise that sort of methodology, and making sure that co-design is threaded through a lot of projects. So thank you. Okay, so let's have a look at these questions. So thank you to those that have put some questions in the chat. I think we'll come to Judith. She's put in a couple of things to Nancy around, I think, Nancy, you may have talked about this, but she was asking about the robots, if they understand any language beside English. And you said about accents, didn't you? So is it that robots can be programmed to talk in any language, or?
Yeah, so it's going to depend. So just to note, first of all, that Pepper, so the robot that I showed, has actually been discontinued. So it will depend on the programming, but they have but robots would have the capability to speak in different languages. One of the things that I didn't talk about as much too is a lot of the models are also starting to use large language models as part of their social interactions, which is going to bring with it obviously some ethical concerns, because we already know that there are a lot of problems with that, but also potential opportunities as well. And yeah, I think that answers that. And
then Judith also asked about the eye tracking, and could the game detect macular degeneration and its changes?
So that's one of the things, depending on how the results come out for this one. So for this specific study, what we have been able to find is that for individuals, we're able to detect, we're not looking for that type of thing, so probably not. But one of the questions that we do have is, as we start to expand the population that we're testing, and people have more kind of standard eye problems and some of the eye problems that might co-occur that are more likely to happen with aging, if the technology works as well, I think is going to be our question. It's not going to be used for diagnosis of such things, but we need to make sure that it does work for people with cataracts, with levels of macular degeneration. Right now, what's been quite positive about the work that we've done is that we have a very diverse sample. So we are finding that we're able to capture the eye movements pretty effectively. And this is just, like I said, with an off-the-shelf camera and a tablet. So that's quite promising, but it wouldn't be used for diagnosis of eye conditions.
Okay, great, thank you. Patricia, I think you put your hand up earlier after Nancy was talking. Did you have a question for Nancy in particular?
Well, yes, I would, if you don't mind. I was going to ask, I know about, now you caught me on the hop.
Sorry.
It's not just when you get older, your sight obviously changes and all the rest of it, but your vision actually slows down, your reactions slow down, and you slow down adjusting from one sight to the next. So as your eye movements are moving, if the light, for instance, is falling differently on whatever it is you're watching, you're not reacting as fast as perhaps you should, and it affects the whole system that you're trying to control, because you're not reacting as fast as you should, and you're dithering, as it were. Your brain is dithering between the two bits. I'm not explaining myself very well. You caught me on the hop.
That's okay.
But it's not just a matter of eye movement. I've done a lot of reading research, and with eye movement and so on and so on. And it can be affected also, apart from the eye movement, by the reaction time your eyes take to change focus from the one to the other. It's not just the movement, it's the focus that makes a huge difference. And I wonder if that has been taken into consideration as well.
Yeah, so one of the things that you can look at those differences in a lot of different ways. So one of the things is that the starting point that we have right now to try to get some data, we'll look at there are going to be age-related changes in the speed of the eye movements. We already know that. And the processing speed overall. The way that we're looking at eye movements, though, is specifically as it changes, as you have changes in cognitive load within a person. So if you, and we can look at this within a person, and then we can also look at it across different types of or across like an age group or another kind of a way to sort people into that. So you're absolutely right. You don't want to be capturing things that are to do with that. You want to be capturing the underlying potential pathophysiology. And that's one of the reasons why I pointed out that we're able to change the difficulty of the task systematically. So people should be doing the same thing consistently. So if they potentially are taking a minute longer to focus, right? I've just switched to multifocal contact lenses and I'm still adjusting to those and how to make those work. So that's obviously going to come into it, but it should do it systematically. It should do it the same way as I'm doing from one trial to the next. So if you can still, one of the things though is that we're not necessarily looking just at that time. We're also looking at that time in that congruent or that easier condition versus the hard condition within myself. What is that difference level? So there's different metrics, and what machine learning allows you to do is put in multiple variables. So yep, it's going to capture some of the noise around some of the changes to the eye that occurs with aging, but it should also still be able to pull out the things that are specific to the changes in difficulty within the task. I think hopefully that's explained it a little bit.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Nancy. I'm going to move on to some questions for Jonathan now. So Kay asked, is there any chance that regular use of the tech, like the right trousers, could lead to people's natural strength declining further or more quickly? Or could it improve muscle strength? Oh, you're on mute, Jonathan.
As always, very good. It's best place for me. Yeah, that's a really good question, Kay. And also, I think it chimes with a question that Karen's put in there as well, which I think is very, very similar. Yeah, so we're very aware that if you give people assistance all the time, there is a danger that they just rely upon it. And that's always the case with technology. We do end up relying upon technology, right? Most of my memory is on my mobile phone now. But there are counterexamples of that which we can rely upon, or at least we can use. And one example is the bicycles. So we've got lots of bicycles at the moment, and we've got the emergence of electric bicycles. And for those who can no longer use manual bicycles, they shift to electric bicycles. And one would think then that they become weaker because they're using the electric bicycles. But it turns out that people are more likely to go out and go further if they have an electric bicycle, so their overall activity is increased. It doesn't suit everybody, but that's an example of whereby one can not say giving something good means that they will always use that thing. On the other side is, of course, trousers are not just dumb. Smart clothing is not going to be dumb, it's going to be intelligent. And there is an opportunity to monitor people to make sure that you deliver assistance when it's needed. So imagine that I wake up in the morning and I feel pretty chirpy. I'm going to walk around. I don't need any assistance. But at the end of the day, having walked around and all that blood has flown to my legs and I'm feeling a bit tired, that's the time that I need a bit of a squeeze in the legs. I need a little bit of extra help. So there's time and a place for both. And I suppose the other thing is, there are stages in aging or stages in a disease, or if you've had a stroke, and then there's rehabilitation, and then there's resistance to help you build up your strength. And then ultimately there is that long-term assistance if you need it. And it's picking the right support for the right person at the right time. That is a challenge. That doesn't answer the question, but I think one is aware that that is a challenge.
Great, thank you. Anne asked, did the lay people who took part in any of the trials indicate if they would consider the robotic support long term, or were they just interested in the uniqueness of it?
When we have done our focus groups with our potential users, they're very keen on these technologies, right? But it's really interesting, not just for themselves, but for everybody that they can think of. It seems that if we're all wearing clothing and we can turn them all into an assistive clothing, then I think it's useful for everybody. I don't think people were thinking of the uniqueness. One can counter that a little bit by when we asked them what they would like their clothing and their power clothing to look like, most people said just like regular clothing, right? Not out and about, visually obvious. People would like, I think the people we've spoken to generally, like to have it subdued. It's not obvious. And so therefore they look and they feel just like they did before they lost their muscle mass or whatever. And I think that's really empowering. And if we can do that, make robotic clothing look normal and stylish as well, and normal, basically everything that normal clothing would do, then I think people will be much more inclined to accept it long term. No, I think people are keen on it.
Right. Okay. And then Linda's said she's interested in where the power lies in decision making in terms of adapting robots once in use. So have your users or PPI groups talked at all about whether they want to be making decisions autonomously, whether they want healthcare practitioners to be deciding, or whether they want this to happen together?
I think this is a perennial question, isn't it, for all of us? The Vivo Hub has got the words independent living in there, and that's really important. And another word is of course autonomy. And none of these technologies, of course, should be taking away autonomy or agency. They should be enabling it. And I think the two go hand in hand. If one can support somebody to be independent and happy, then they will have agency and they are supported by the system. So I don't view any of this as taking power away or decision making away. I do think, though, that people have to have confidence in the systems that are behind them. And that is, confidence in the AI that is monitoring them and then suggesting that they should have some help here. Confidence in the data that is being recorded from them and then going out to the cloud, going to the NHS, going to the doctors who are then going to make that decision. It'd be lovely if we had lots of humans doing this real time, but we're going to have to rely upon smart tech for that. And provided that people have got confidence in that, I think they'll be happy. At least that's what people have said so far.
Right. And I think one last thing Judith just pointed out was this issue of is it going to be affordable and sort of available to everybody, and will it almost increase inequality if these things are not readily available because they're too expensive, I guess.
Yeah, that's a consideration that we have. It's one of those things that we always say. You have a grant of a couple of £1 million. The first pair of trousers, £2 million it cost us. But of course, our goal is to make things that are much cheaper. So when we put together the Vivo Hub, we talked to the World Health Organization specifically on this point, because the problems we're all facing with aging are universal across the world. And there's no point making a technology which is going to work for the middle class or the upper class or the rich in the UK, but is not transferable to India or Africa.
Some of the poor people here.
Sorry, say again?
Sorry.
Yeah.
Poor people here.
Well, exactly. Right. So it's the same everywhere. You're right. So we need to do that. Now, we're quite lucky in that some of the technologies we develop are quite low cost, but we have to keep them low cost. So that is a challenge. And it's very much the case. I suppose going with that is some of our clothing has to be washable and disposable because it wears out. And then it's that kind of sustainability aspect. So if we put those together, sustainable, low cost, recyclable, it becomes okay. I think we can do it. I think we're not talking about really expensive gold plated, diamond encrusted stuff. No, we're talking much more prosaic.
Brilliant. Thank you. Well, we've got about a minute left, so thank you everybody, and especially to Nancy and Jonathan for your presentations today. Jen's put something in the chat, the links to our previous forums if you're interested in them. Apologies again for our technology difficulties at the beginning of the session, but hopefully those that weren't able to join us will be able to catch up with the recording.